Tebe is an associate professor of computer science, and he is a deputy vice chancellor for academic research and consultants at the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere University of Agriculture and Technology. But formerly he was the principal of Core ICT. He has quite a lot of experience in computer science. Siwezi hata nikaeleza yote because of time, but just know that Professor Ntebe is a very, very experienced expert in computer science. Then we have our discussant. Therefore, I would like to call upon Professor Peter Lawrence Makenga Msofe. Yeye ni mkurugenzi Higher Education, Ministry for Education, Science and Technology. Professor Msofe is an expert or specialized on veterinary medicine, and he has quite a lot of experience on issues of public health, and he also he was the former managing director for National Ranching Company. Our second discussant is Professor Eda Tandi Loga. He's a rector at CBE, College of Business Education. She holds position as a rector for quite, and Professor Loga has published more than 100 publications. Professor Loga is an expert in information science. I now want to call upon Dr. Julius Keyu, who is the Director of Research, and he is a Chief Research Officer at Tanzania Wildlife Research Institute. He specialized on population health and disease ecology. Dr. Keyu has quite experience in research management for, I think, is more than 20 years. I'd like now to call upon engineer Dr. Abraham Ali from SUSA. Dr. Ali is the head of the Center for Digital Learning and Lecture in the State University, as I mentioned, and he holds a PhD degree in science, in system engineering and management. Karibuni sana. Having introduced the presenter and the panelists, I would like now to call upon Professor Ntebe to deliver his keynote presentation, and then later we'll have a discussion. Karibu, Professor Ntebe. Fred.
Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. Good morning. As have been introduced, my name is Joel Ntebe. I worked as the Principal of College of ICT of the University of Islam for some times, and now have just moved to another university, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, responsible for academics, research, and consultants. And I'll be presenting this keynote speech or presentation in the topic of advanced open science for knowledge-driven society and sustainable STI resource governance in Tanzania. I have divided my presentation into 4 bullets. One, I'll start with the introduction. Thereafter, I will just go through and scan the status of open science globally, regional, and in our country. Thereafter, I will go through a little bit on the challenge that we are facing as a country in trying to advance the open science. And thereafter, very briefly, I'll go through and discuss about the future prospects of the open science in Tanzania and globally. Now, to start my presentation, the term open science is very common, but mostly it refers to the general movement. It's a movement that wants to make the scientific activities output in terms of research, data, source code, and everything that comes from outside the research accessible to all levels of the society. And then can include not only the professions that are there in the industry, but also academics, even the general public. And this is totally different from the way research or science has been conducted, where we are now shifting from traditional, where everything has been closed. But this time around, the open science looks at the openness, making things being more transparent, encourage collaboration, but also inclusivity in terms of the not only the findings, but also the process, the data, and all other stuff that's related to open science and research. Now, there are key principles when we are talking about open science movement. And there are more or less 7 principles. They vary from different contexts, but mostly importantly, one being the open access publishing. As we are all aware, the issue of publications has been quite challenging, especially in closed databases. So the open science movement encourages them to make research publications being freely and openly accessible to everyone. Wherever you publish your article, any findings, any scientific work, it is encouraged that these should be available for everyone. But not only the publications, but they go beyond this movement, talking about data. The data that comes from research in any way need to be available for the public domain, and it can be accessible to everyone. Not only the data that comes from research, but even the methodology that they are being used to conduct such kind of research. All these are part of the so-called open science movement. These are the key principles. In addition to those key principles, others including collaboration. Open science movement encourages open and collaboration in terms of research with all the community, whether it's a global north or global south. But also, there's an issue of OER, open education resources. I will discuss it later on and some good examples. But given now these resources are being developed by academics in different universities, different institutions, the open science movement, one of the key principles is to ensure that these resources are made freely available to support teaching, research, and knowledge dissemination across all the institutions globally. And finally, we all know the power of open source software, the power of leaving or sharing the source code of whatever we are developing in terms of what we call software products. The open science movement requires, as one of the key principles, is to make all these resources in terms of code, software, and everything being available to the general public, so that you can just download, reuse it, disseminate for different purposes. Now, by doing so, the open science movement and putting everything being transparent, collaboratively, and with those key principles that I've just mentioned. Basically, there are a lot of advantages that comes out of the open science movement. And these are some. There might be many, but these are just some that I've just summarized. One is by sharing the resources and the findings, generally, we can easily foster what we call interdisciplinary collaboration between different disciplines within the research domain. It's quite easily, if these resources, the findings, and the other resources can be shared and made available for everyone to access. But another big advantage is that it can easily create an environment where our research, our findings can be reproducible. Sharing raw data, methodologies, results can enable others not only to reproduce, but also can validate whatever we are producing in our studies. And by doing so, we contribute towards the big picture of doing research. But one of the challenges that we are always facing as academics or researchers is that sometimes in other institutions or other universities, they are located in rural areas or in remote areas. Making these resources being available, you can easily make these resources being accessible to even those communities that are either in remote areas or disadvantaged for some good or some reasons. But remember, we are talking about research here and the research findings. And most of the research findings and the research that we are doing in our environments are state-funded, the majority of them, or funded by other donors. By making them being accessible, available in a public domain, basically, it becomes the community tend to trust whatever is coming because they can even verify, can go back and look at what was developed. So, in the next slides, let me talk a little bit on the status of open science movement and whatever is happening, the current trend in open science globally, regionally, and nationally. I'll just scan through because there are a lot of resources that are available in the public domain that try to explain what is happening globally. I might not cover most of the parts, but I try to cover some to give you an idea of what is happening in terms of open science movement across the global, regionally, and nationally. Now, we are all aware, one of the open science movement requires that the open source software made available to everyone so that people can download it. Now, for those who are coming from computing field, you can all agree that software development nowadays is almost 90% of the software product that we are using currently, they originate from open source software. You can name many of them. If you look at this tree diagram, for those who are coming from computing, you could see those icons, they scan across from Linux, content management systems, MySQL database systems, and many, many others. And if you go across the public domain, you are very likely to find a software application or a software product which is commercial, but rather there is another similar product that is open source. And in fact, they are trying also to encourage these open source products to be available. You can easily go and download it, reuse it, redevelop, do whatever, given now you are adhering to the Creative Commons licenses. Not only software products, globally, a lot of learning resources in the form of open education resources, or OER, have been developed and they are available in the public domain. They are shared for everyone to be able to download and reuse them. For those who are coming from academics, from universities, we are all aware that we have met somehow with the resources from, let's say, MIT courseware. MIT, I think 20 years ago, made a very good decision of recording, developing, learning resources, and then they put them available in the public domain and accessible. You can just go there, download or reuse, and use to teach in your own institutions. That goes across many, many other institutions, Utah, UCT, and there are so many universities and institutions across around the world that have shared openly the learning resources in form of animations, simulations, video, any kind of resource that are available for you to be able to use it. These are some of the open science movement. They're trying to show that you can share these resources available for public consumption. Now, if we go back to policy level, there are a lot of nowadays, if you go into funding, a lot of global funding organizations, they are putting as a requirement, whatever you are doing in terms of publications, data, you are supposed to put them and make them available through the public domain. If you look at the UNESCO, for instance, UNESCO, they have developed a policy that requires you, wherever you are conducting some sort of research, and you have data, you have software, you have products, you have to put them and make them available through the public domain. The same way, for instance, European Union, globally, they mandate open access for publicly funded research. You can see even the European Union now, it's a requirement that if you are doing research supported or funded by European Union, it's one of the requirements in the open science movement. You have to put your findings accessible through the public domain. The same way, US Office of Science and Technology, they are also doing the same, but there are also some repositories in terms of infrastructure. If you look at nowadays, there are so many national research and educational networks across the world that they are also encouraging sharing research output, data, software, everything through the public domain. But in terms of software development, there are also already available some very good and well-developed platforms for sharing resources in terms of open access repositories, the likes of Zenodo, ThinkShare, Preprints. There are quite many. I can't mention a lot of them. There are quite many. All these movements try to show that sharing resources through the public domain is the way to go. I've just found this one of the very interesting infrastructure from the European Union, where they have developed a platform or infrastructure that supports open science. In this website, if you go there, it's supported by the European Union, you find that there are tools, services, expertise to make research output accessible and reusable, and you can interoperate across all the institutions. It includes the open access repositories, research data management tools, and many, many others. So you can see even the European Union, they have even developed the platform that there are a lot of resources that are there that can be available for the public consumption. And this is another screen that I've just screened from the website of the OpenAR, which shows all these kind of resources. In Africa, yes, we are still lagging behind. We are at the early stages, but let me assure you, although there is a slow adoption of open science across various institutions and universities in Africa, yet there are already some good developments. There are already some national initiatives across Africa in some countries where they are developing some policies to encourage sharing these kind of resources. I've just picked a few countries, for instance, Ethiopia, South Africa. These are, it is a country that they are at the forefront of sharing or developing some framework or policies to encourage sharing of these open science resources or within the institutions. And there are also some continental initiatives in terms of at AU. There is also one very famous, known as African Open Science Platform, which was launched to promote open science across the continent. This is a continental initiatives. If you go to individual universities or institutions, it's very commonly nowadays, you could see some institutional repositories that are emerging in terms of Agile. They are in almost every universities, or they have some sort of repositories or that they share findings, research for the public consumption. These are regional initiatives that are there. I just picked a few, as I said, in a few countries, but if you go into the public domain, there are a lot of developments that are happening, trying to encourage the open science sharing of these kind of resources. This is what I've just mentioned. It's African Open Science Platform. This is a continental, which is hosted by National Research Foundation, supported by South African Department of Science and Innovation and the International Science Council. In fact, it stimulates interactivity, building shared capacities, achieving economy of scale, and amplifying impact of unified purpose. There are a lot of resources that are shared in this platform. This is also a continental platform that shares open science research. I've just also picked the OER Africa. This is also one of the big resources that they are sharing, learning resources in terms of audio, video, some policy briefs, and a lot of resources that are available in OER Africa. If you go to this website, you'll find there are so many good resources that are available, shared through the public domain. I understand even other institutions in Africa, for instance, UCT, University of Cape Town, they also have similar kind of initiatives. And this one is the South African National Research Foundation. And in fact, it's a South African initiative. And basically, they have open access to research facilities where, for researchers, you can find, you can put information, including type of facility, manufacturer dates. There are a lot of resources that are there that you can get from these initiatives. Let me finalize scanning through global, regional, and by going through what is happening nationally here in Tanzania. I may miss some initiatives that have not seen them, but I'll try to give you an idea that although it's happening globally and locally, and regionally, but also locally, we have some good initiatives. One is, as you are aware, if you go to universities or institutions across the country, it's very common you find there are what we call institutional depositories, where they are sharing nowadays academic papers, findings. If you go to the website of UDSM, Sokoine University of Agriculture, Mjenwati, and many other universities, you are very likely to find some depositories where resources are being shared. Although they are still in small scale in terms of whatever is shared, but at least there is an initiative that is happening. It's an early stage, but we are heading towards that direction. COSTECH, they have also developed what we call National Data Sharing Framework for Science, Technology, and Innovation. This is also a framework that encourages us sharing some sort of data for science, technology, and innovation. And also I'm aware that there's an ongoing effort of developing the national repository that will be hosted by COSTECH, but shared across all the institutions. These are some of the policy frameworks that are already happening in Tanzania. As I said, in terms of institutions and universities, they have their own systems, depositories that they are sharing also resources across themselves, but at national level, COSTECH is taking also the lead. We have also a very good resource that is pioneered by COSTECH in collaboration with the other institutions. It's called biodiversity data, which there are more than 1.9 billion records of animals, plants, microorganisms, which can be accessible freely by any researcher. So all these are initiatives that are pioneered by COSTECH, and these are at national level. Let me finalize my keynote presentation by looking at the challenges. Yes, as you can see, sharing whatever we are doing is in open science, whether it's data, research findings, software code, or peer review or collaboration, it provides a lot of advantages to our institutions and the general public. However, we are still faced with some challenges. Now, these challenges include infrastructure. As you're all aware that to be able to access these resources, we need some internet connectivity. We are still facing some institutions where internet is still a challenge, but also funding. Developing these kind of resources, sharing, they require some funding. Unfortunately, as you all know, funding is always a limited resource. But also we are faced with the policy and institutional barriers. If you go to some universities, they still believe if they develop learning resources for learners, they can sell. But wakauza notes. You see, so we still have those IP policies, intellectual property rights, ambazo they tend to protect whatever we are developing from our own institutions rather than sharing through the public domains. So we still have some challenges in terms of policies within our institutions, even at national level. But also there's this issue of legal and ethical concern, especially when you're talking about data privacy and ethical issues. What kind of data that we need to share? What will be the ethical implications and the privacy issues? There are a lot of challenges, but these are some of the challenges that, of course, hinder open science development in Tanzania. Finally, despite these challenges, the future is bright. I was reading some of the articles that they are trying to project what is happening. Globally, the market in terms of increasing open access market is increasing significantly. Even in Tanzania, through the funding of HEAT, I'm aware that institutions are investing a significant amount of resources to be able now to develop this digital platform to share some resources and some findings. In the next 2 or 3 years after HEAT funding ends, we are expected to have to see a lot of development in terms of development of learning resources, research findings that will be shared through the public domain, and people will be able to access these kind of resources. But interestingly, we're talking about sharing these resources, but there's another enabler. As we know, AI is making a very big disruption in terms of enabling open science research and sharing these resources globally. But also, recently we have seen increased collaboration and partnership across institutions within our continent, not only locally, but also globally. So the future of open science is bright, and we are looking forward to see a lot of resources whenever we are developing either data, code, software, research findings, and methodology to be available for public domain, because most of these are state-funded projects. We are using taxpayers' money, and we expect that these will be shared across the globe and available through our citizens. Thank you very much.
Nakushukuru sana Profesa Mtebe kwa presentation yako nzuri sana. Nafikiri wote tumeielewa na ninaona kabisa kwamba kuna nafasi nzuri sana kwa Tanzania katika masuala haya ya open science. Sasa ni mkaribishe swali langu la kwanza liende kwa Profesa Loga ambaye ni mbobezi kwenye masuala ya information science. Profesa Loga, tumeona presentation ya Profesa Mtebe hapa. Ametuambia kuhusu open science. Sasa tungependa kujua, je, are there any misconception about open science? Yeah. Kwa sababu wengine wanatafikiria ni data, wengine wanafikiria kama profesa anavyoongezea kuna masuala ya facilities na whatever vinginevyo. Sasa are there any misconception about open science, na kama ipo ni ipi? And then I also like to hear from you why advancing open science in Tanzania is essential. Karibu sana. You can just use the mic there. Professor Loga, you have 5 minutes, please.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Professor Mtebe, thank you, Dr. Hulda. Yes, as far as open science is concerned, there are a lot of misconceptions, and professors highlighted some of them, where some people have been worried that why do we make data publicly available? And that might also inhibit the quality or the accessibility of data, and people are worried if the data is openly available, that means it can be misused as well. But with open science and access, Professor Mtebe talked about institutional repositories in which data can also be shared in a controlled environment. And actually, before anyone is able to access the data, they might need to consult the author so that they're able to access it. But there are also misconceptions that having made available research outputs, it might lead to competition among scientists. But that is also a misconception, because once you make the data available, the research available, you enable the research to move forward. You enable the science to progress much further, because people are able to access data, they are able to access publications when the paper is being submitted through the peer review, people are able to access it. They are also able to improve what they're doing currently. So that also enables science to move forward, to even move faster, and that is also another misconception. And another misconception is open science is more aligned to natural science, aligned to science and technology. But we are also seeing open science being applicable in social science and other areas, other disciplines. So it's a multidisciplinary issue, and any researcher can use open science to advance accessibility of their research. And another misconception that we are seeing, that there are issues concerned intellectual property rights. But with open access, it's very easy for scientists actually to license their own work. As soon as they publish, the researchers are the ones who retain their copyright. So that gives them the right to also ensure that the science is their research is being reused and it's made available to everyone, because they're the ones who retain the license. So with open science, it has enabled our research to move even further, to be easily accessible. As we know, in our African environment, most of the research that is being published, you have to pay in order to access it. Is under subscription. So with open science, it has enabled first researchers to have exclusive rights to license their own work and made it available. And when we look into our environment, why should we adopt open science? Why should we talk about open science? And I would really like to thank COSTECH for having this panel, because this is one of the ways that we can more talk about it, and the researchers, they can adopt and use it. So why do we need it? First, it enables access to knowledge, of which, when we talk about 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it was not easily available to have access to it, because most of the research is made available under subscription. And when you look at the data, the research that was published by, a report that was published by UNESCO in 2021, it showed in Africa, only 23% of African researchers were able to access the research that has been published. And when we look on even our capacity to publish, when we look on the UNESCO report of 2023, it shows African researchers only contribute to 2% of the world's publication. That means even when what we publish very little, but we do a lot of research that is remaining in our shelves, it's remaining on our laptops, it's remaining in our library. So open science is there to help us even to make available what we have already researched, that is made available through our libraries, through our laptops, but we can easily make it available via open science. And even because we end up presenting in conferences, but to publish in journals, very few researchers are able to make up to that level. But with open science and repositories, we're able to ensure that the knowledge that we publish is made available and readily available for use. And we're also seeing institutions, as Professor Mtebe showed us, a lot of universities, over 20 universities have their repositories. And we also have the national initiative by COSTECH that is also helping to make this research more accessible. But with open science, it's also enabling collaboration and innovation. And here we are talking about open data. Open Data Africa portal, that is also has a portal for each country, and we also have a for Tanzania. It's enabled accessibility of our data, especially from the National Bureau of Statistics. Researchers are now able to even do more secondary analysis and see what has already been done, and then they can improve it. And we're also seeing applicability of research in development and economic areas, because nowadays it's easy for scientists when they publish their data, and it can be used for economic issues. We are seeing, for example, data that Tanzania Meteorological Agency. It's being applicable for smallholder farmers to give them different indications as far as climate change, climate or weather is concerned, and then they're able to apply it. But we are also seeing applicability of research outputs or scientific data also to enable innovation. And these are like, for examples from Rwanda, where we are seeing that the research that has been done is being used by fintech to actually produce or to develop more mobile apps, and it's been enabling for the country to move forward. But we are also seeing that the citizens are able to be engaged with research as far as open science is concerned. So I think we need to talk about it in conferences like this, but we also need a national policy. Also, it's a call for our institutions as well to also establish repositories. And I'd like to thank Professor. Here we have from Professor Msofe from the Ministry of Science and Technology. I'm sure we'll also encourage our institutions to have this policy so that we can encourage our researchers to open up access to their research and also apply it as well. And also we need to build capacity and also establish more open access journals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Loga. From his talk, I think all of us, we agree that open science is essential for our country to, especially in research, in development. We need to open up our data, but also we have to share facilities, infrastructures for research and for innovation as well as technology. Then I would like to, because we do have a time constraint, I want to move to engineer Dr. Abrahamani Ali. As a software engineer, we want to learn from you about the key success factors for those who are achieving success in open science. We already heard from Professor all the achievement at global level, at regional level, and at national level. So we'd like to learn what are those factors which made them to be successful, and how do you know that they are making success? How can you measure the success? And then what are the skills and talents required to achieve open science desired results?
Thank you, Dr. Gideon, and thank you, Professor Ntebe. First of all, I would like to declare my position on this. I'm a strong believer and supporter of open science myself, and I've not just advocating it, but I've started taking action. I've been publishing in open access journal myself, and recently I developed a data science tool, particularly in AI. I'm an AI expert. So I've spent a couple of months to develop it, if not a year, and it's publicly available for the community around the world to use it. So that's the starting point, and this is the only way that we believe we should be proceeding towards to. Now, coming to the success factors, in my opinion, I believe that number one success factor is a strong institutional support and leadership, because if you're looking from a perspective of universities or academic institutions, research institutions, government agencies, even private sector, we need to see both or all of these sectors moving toward open science by adopting policies, framework, regulations, and even establishing a shared platform. So this will really highlight the need towards open science to the community. But also another success factor that we talk about here is in terms of community engagement, as my colleague professor has spoken about here. And we need to see how community is engaged in terms of knowledge-driven society and the whole educational ecosystem. Communities and societies need to be participated in terms of data collection, in terms of processing, and be informed of what has been discovered. So once we see this is a success factor. But not only that, we have spoken about the misperception about data privacy, intellectual property. So one of the key success factors that I see here is to have enough transparency and governance and regulations of how the data will be protected, the intellectual properties of the people will be protected as well. So that will be another important key success factor. But another success factor we can talk about is technological advancement. When we talk about open science, we talk about shared environment, collaboration environment, shared data platforms. These are all digital platforms, and they need to be developed enough to make sure that they've been penetrating towards all levels of society. So these are a couple of success factors I will talk about for now. But how do we know that there's a growth and we are moving to the right path? I think is to build around indicators, around all of this I've just said. We need to keep track of a number of openly available journals in Tanzania, number of publications that have been published in open access journals, available open data sets, number of shared platforms and collaborations. But also we need to see of how the universities and institutions, research institutions collaborate and network each other. This is really crucial for the open science approach. But I think we can also look from the perspective of policy integration as well. We need to see how these institutions are integrating their policies towards open science. Now, coming to the questions of skills and talent that is required, we mentioned that we are moving towards open science, which is data and digital driven. So we need technological expertise and skills in this sense, because we need people to take care and manage those platforms that have been developed. But not only that, we can also talk about the data and data and research skills as well, because for you to be part of the game, you need to know the rules of the game. So if you want to move towards open science, we need to make sure that people have enough skills of what is allowed ethically in open science and what are the don'ts of open science as well to avoid. But another skill is to have people that could have good knowledge and skills in developing the right policies. This is really important because we need to have the right policies to govern the open science world. But we are talking about collaboration and networking. We need skills of people to have communication and networking skills as well. That's all from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer Dr. Ali. Would you mind if I ask you one more question? What inspired you to study software engineer?
We are in the 21st century, and we say that it's a century of science and technology. And as we all know that we are moving toward, actually we are already there in AI, artificial intelligence, and the future is technology. So I believe that this is a tool that can or will address most of the challenges and could be a bridge towards the future that we all foresee. Software is a crucial part of it, and we need to adapt this track as well to make sure that, and that's the reason why I decided my software would be open source, because I believe that this software could be used anywhere around the world to solve any problem. God knows how it's been used there. So for me, I'm happy that it's been used at least.
Asante sana engineer. Natamani siku moja ni kuone una watu kama 100 wako nyuma yako na wewe umewamold wao ni wamekaa kwenye your profession, because as we see we need a lot of engineers, especially in the software, because that's where we are moving towards too. Swali langu la tatu linaenda kwa Dr. Keyu. Dr. Keyu has been working with TAWIRI in research management. Kwa hiyo ana experience kubwa sana ya management ya utafiti hapa nchini. Sasa swali langu Dr. Keyu ni kwamba, with that experience, what are the future trends of open science? And do you think that there are some consequences if we don't move into the open science as a country? Karibu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hulda. And let me thank the organizers for inviting me. So, 2 questions. The future of open science. Professor Mtebe has said it well that the current status of open science in Tanzania is at an early stage. And he said that adoption is slow. But let me take this opportunity to assure you that the future of open science is very promising. The future of open science is very promising, and Prof. Mtebe said it well that open market in 2026, it will be close to $7 billion US. So we have to embrace the open science concept. Sometimes it's called open science movement, because the future is very promising and it will be an emerging beacon of progress. And it has started well in the healthcare, in technology, and other sectors. Number 2, you asked what are the consequences if we will not embrace open science. From what I've said, because these are emerging concepts or movements, if we not embrace, we will be left behind. Because the world is changing, the landscape is changing, we have to move with the landscape or with the movement or the emerging concept. So we have all the justifications to embrace the open science movement, because if we are left behind, we will not be in a position to trade, and what we are doing will not be known, because it's all about sharing data and information. If what you are doing is not known, if your results are not known by the community, by decision makers, by politicians, count it not done. So it's a time to make sure that we share what we are doing, and what we are doing is known by the local community and decision makers and all stakeholders. The other consequences, it will be economic consequences. As I've said, that open markets will move from $3 billion US to $7 billion US. We will have an economic consequences if we don't embrace open science. And lastly, what I want to share with you that, as Hulda has said, I've been in research management for over 20 years. And we noted that sharing of data and information is very low. Within institutions, people are working in silos, and just in the next room, sometimes people don't know what is going in an adjacent room. So that's why we thank COSTECH for developing the National Data Sharing Framework, because it is a gateway for developing institutional data sharing framework, regional data sharing framework, and they took a further step. They involved me in training research ethics committees of 4 institutions in Tanzania mainland and 4 research institutions in Zanzibar to develop standard operating procedures for research ethics committees, where there is a specific SOP on data sharing, what to share, how to share, and some aspects of data transfer agreement, DTA. And the other thing which I want to pose it to you, we have been having a problem of sharing research facilities. So let us move from data sharing, information sharing, to a next step of sharing research facilities. It has been a problem in Tanzania, and we have a duplication of research equipments, some of which are running 1 or 2 cycles per year. There is no need of having a similar, expensive, high-quality research instrument for every institution. We can have few, what we want in the country, and establish a sharing framework of research facilities in our labs, in our institutions, and we put forward a framework. If I'm coming from Tawiri, I want to go to Tariri, I want to use a Sanger sequencer or an Illumini, what are the procedures for me to share with that facility at Tariri? So we can have one facility at Tariri where all researchers can use, another one or a microarray platform at Tawiri where all others can come to share. So while we are embracing open science, let us take a step further to embrace sharing of research resources, research facilities in our institutions. And in Tanzania, we have another difficult problem, doing animal research. In an act of the Ministry of Health, animal samples cannot go into a public health laboratory. So there is a need to change some of the acts and the legislations. Okay, even DNA, if they don't allow samples from a dog, from a chimpanzee, can they allow just DNA? Currently, even DNA from an animal cannot go in a public health laboratory. So these are some of the issues we have to address holistically when we are addressing open science, open data, open information, and sharing of research facilities. Thank you very much.
Asante sana Daktari Keyu. Nafikiri wote tumempata vizuri. The needs for sharing data, the needs for sharing facilities, the need for sharing equipment, the need for sharing even the infrastructures. Na ameongea kitu kizuri sana hapo. Sasa tujiulize, hapo jirani yako, do you know jirani yako amefanya nini na ana data za aina gani? Can you ask your jirani hapo? Manake everybody is working in silo. Una jirani yako, you are in the same department, you did your research, you finished your research, the data which you collected from the field, you remain with them in your laptop. Your neighbor again goes to the field to collect new data. But this data which he or she has, you can use them for analysis, more analysis. And for the case that we are moving forward with this catastrophe of climate change, we need to have large quantities of data to do modeling. So it is inevitable to have big data.